Founded in 1838, the ARTIS Royal Zoo in Amsterdam is the oldest zoo in the Netherlands, and its rich history can be felt all over the 14-hectare park. And with a still abundant animal collection, visitors are also offered many great wildlife experiences. But has the park arrived in the modern age, especially when it comes to animal husbandry, or has it fallen out of time? Is it worth visiting as a tourist too, or can and should you safely ignore ARTIS during your stay in Amsterdam? In the following video I will show you everything the Dutch capital zoo has to offer and share my opinions with you. Let me know what you have to say about ARTIS in the comments. And with that being said, let's start exploring the park, which is organized in 4 areas: the front garden, the middle garden, the back garden and the new garden. Obviously we start with the entrance area, which is set to be redesigned in the coming years to better manage visitor flows and to offer a clearer view into the park from the street. That seems like a worthwhile goal to me, as even the first impression of the park is very inviting. The zoo shines in the lush green of its abundant vegetation, and its history and cultural aspects are also immediately noticeable. Take for instance the Keeper, a statue donated by the zoo staff to commemorate its 150th anniversary. The first actual animals you will see are probably the scimitar oryxes, majestic antelopes that without the efforts of zoos would have vanished from our planet. However, they are not alone on their enclosure here, they actually live together with meerkats. If you turn left from the entrance and walk past this enclosure, you'll come to 2 historic buildings that now can essentially be considered as one. The birdhouse, built in 1910 in the Art Nouveau style, and the former monkey house from 1908, which is now known as the Forest House. Both were constructed at the time on the foundations of even older buildings and have taken their current form since a renovation completed in 2012. As you can see, you can already spot a variety of bird species in the outdoor aviaries, although that's not always easy in sometimes densely planted enclosures. Even here you can get a sense that several aviaries have been merged, the number of animals has been reduced and the overall conditions were modernized significantly. But the full extent of the transformation only becomes clear once you step inside the buildings. In the former monkey house there used to be numerous enclosures lining both sides of a wide visitor pathway, housing different species of monkeys and in earlier times even great apes. But now the entire hall has been converted into a walk-through enclosure, so the animals can move freely throughout the whole building. And of course, this also gives visitors a completely new kind of experience. Being able to observe the monkeys in this jungle-like setting without any barriers is of course something quite special. And it's not just New World monkeys like white-faced sakis or pygmy marmosets living here, but also several other South American species such as prehensile-tailed porcupines or the ever-popular sloths. And since the animals can also retreat into areas that are not accessible to visitors and sometimes not even visible, this really is a great combination of animal experience, historical setting and modern husbandry. And this impression continues in the birdhouse, which consists of 3 walk-through halls. In the first one you are greeted by a rocky coastal landscape and can experience the beautiful Inca terns up close. Also living here are puna ibises. The next hall becomes more tropical with much denser greenery, but you should still be able to spot the bear poachers here, and in the background, housed in separate aviaries, are knobbed hornbills. The third hall takes us into the savannah. Once again, there is a separated area where you will find, among others, weaver birds, as well as a whole range of other species, like the beautiful hoopoe, which also lives in parts of Europe. But here too, the main part of the hall isn't separated from visitors, so there's nothing keeping you from getting close to other bird species like the hammerkop. What impressed me most here was the lesser crestal, which is rarely kept in zoos. And so I started this zoo visit with a genuine sense of excitement, because at first it really did seem as though history and modernity had been combined here in a very successful way. And that impression was largely confirmed as I explored the rest of the front garden. Right of the entrance, there is the so-called large aviary, a name it truly lives up to. The only thing that left me a bit puzzled was the bird population here, which mostly just consisted of spoonbills. The flamingos, on the other hand, still live with clipped wings in one of 3 pond enclosures, whose history also dates back to the 19th century. A canal used to run through this area dividing the zoo, but since it was rerouted in 1866, the ponds have been located here and their layout is now recognized as a national monument. The other 2 ponds are home to monkey islands, with the red-faced spider monkeys living here since 2019. From their stilt house via ropes, they can reach both of their islands, which are equipped with tall climbing structures. The house of the yellow-checked gibbons is located a bit further away, so there is a connection via mesh tunnel which leads over the visitors' heads straight to their island, where they can sit in the treetops and let their call echo throughout the whole zoo. In addition, pelicans live alongside the spider monkeys, and the ponds are home to many native bird species. This adds even more to the overall impression of these beautifully designed nature-like pond landscapes that feel like a green oasis of nature in the middle of the city. Just in front of the monkey islands, in the middle of the front garden, a new enclosure was already almost ready for its new inhabitants. This area, where Japanese macaques lived for many years, may now already be home to small clawed otters and red pandas. Admittedly, the enclosure might first catch the eye with its angular artificial rock structure, but what makes this exhibit special is that the red pandas can access many of the surrounding trees via aerial bridges, something that will surely be a great experience for visitors as well. We are now almost done with the front garden, but the last thing we need to talk about is the Reptile House. This one looks a little bit more old-fashioned and isn't modernized like the forest and bird house, but I still like the way it is organized in the main hall. To the left there are a lot of terrariums with different types of reptiles, lizards, snakes, tortoises and turtles. It's not the biggest collection and has clearly been reduced to give some of the animals more space, but there's still a lot to see. Opposite the terraria are open enclosures for crocodiles, or rather false gharials. With their dense vegetation, they create a certain jungle atmosphere, which is also reflected by the high humidity in the hall. And honestly, that's all I really have to say here, because it's just so mediocre. Nothing really stands out, neither positive nor negative. At some point they should also start to overhaul things here, but there is currently a much greater need in other areas, but we'll come to that later. But first, let's talk about an area that is already gone, or has changed, or is changing actually. Because back in the days, right behind the Reptile House, there used to be the Predator Gallery, which mainly consisted of cages like this. They were demolished in 2015, while the so-called Kerbert-Terrasse remained and was still being used for lions up until recently. The Kerbert-Terrasse was opened back in 1927 and was inspired by the fenceless enclosure design of Carl Hagenbeck. So it's nice to see that it's preserved and is now being converted for lemurs. The red-ruffed lemurs already live close by on a walk-through island, which is very nice designed. And in the future it looks like they will be able to switch between those two enclosures, which they will share with ring-tailed lemurs as well. But apart from this new enclosure, the middle garden still has a very historic feel to it, as this ibex rock already shows. Nevertheless, I really like this pampa enclosure for Patagonian maras, South American tapirs, and the ever so popular capybaras. Oh, and I almost forgot about the southern screamers. The bridge over the enclosure in particular enhances the visitor experience of this rather large enclosure, at least for a city zoo. A bit further on, a striking net construction catches the eye. There is no doubt that the architecture of the Jaguar Complex, which opened in 2016, is extremely impressive. Between the two outdoor enclosures, above the hidden indoor area, you can climb an artificial rock formation from which you can overlook the enclosures to the left and right from above. There are only two small glass windows on the ground where you need a bit of luck to spot one of the jaguars. The views through the netting on both sides give you a better chance. But if you want to take photos or videos here, it can be difficult depending on the light. As you can see, I was even able to film a mother with her offspring here, which was born on October 22nd, 2024. This is the second breeding success here, the first one was in 2017. The architecture and visitor experience of this enclosure are really great, and the design and furnishings are also perfectly suited for the needs of jaguars. However, at 400 and 600 square meters respectively, the two outdoor enclosures do not meet my expectations of how much space should be made available to big cats like jaguars. The middle section of the park is also beautifully designed and offers plenty of space between the enclosures to take a deep breath and simply enjoy the atmosphere. But it's not just around the enclosures that the design is beautiful and detailed. For example, the crested macaques, which are now kept quite rarely, have a house in the style of the Toraja culture of Sulawesi. I also really like the enclosure of the red-crowned cranes, which have just bred. There used to be many smaller cages here at the monastery ruins, which were torn down, and today the area is completely covered by a net. There are so many animals to see here that I can't possibly show you everything in detail. Just in the pheasantry you'll find countless birds: Bali mynas, northern bald ibises, macaques, toucans, and my new friend, the Electus parrot, plus many more. Some of the aviaries here once again have a historic flair to them, and all of them seem to offer reasonably good housing conditions, though without really standing out in a particularly positive way. Most are relatively compact, although the macaque aviary is quite spacious, just like the similarly designed aviary for scarlet ibises and others. We also need to talk about the small mammal house. It was built in 1977 and therefore has neither the historical charm of many of the other buildings here, nor does it feel particularly modern. This is where the ring-tailed lemurs still used to live during my visit. Depending on when you're seeing this, they might have moved on to their new enclosure we talked about earlier. Even the somewhat outdated Wikipedia article makes it clear that significantly more animals were once kept here. But even now there's still plenty to see in both the indoor and outdoor enclosures. Cotton-top tamarins and Goldie's monkeys, as well as southern three-banded armadillos. Also there are dwarf mangooses, grey-handed night monkeys, lesser mouse deers and other small mammals, and despite the name, this landscape aquarium also houses several turtles, and outside I even spotted the rarely kept blue-ground doves. So the animal collection is still quite interesting, but the building itself felt a bit dull to me. What I did find really charming though was the idea of displaying animal drawings made by children here. We now continue to the back garden, for the moment passing by elephants and giraffes, as they belong to the new garden, which we are saving for the end. A truly impressive sight is the Vulture aviary, spanning 765 square meters and rising 8 meters high, stretching out in front of ARTIS' former ethnographic museum. Here you can find the griffin vultures, which also had a chick. At this point here, the path leads underneath the aviary and through the building, emerging on the other side at the enclosure of the red-necked wallabies, marking our arrival in the back garden. Here we now first look at a brutalist building from 1968, the old Hippo House, which also housed tapirs and even manatees back in the day. Yes, this tank, which today houses a few larger fish species, really did once hold manatees. By comparison, the current main residents of the buildings are much better off with their indoor enclosure. Still, the gorilla keeping at ARTIS is rightly criticized, mainly because the space available, both indoors and outdoors, is absolutely limited, and overall it doesn't fully meet the standards of modern animal husbandry. I really hope they tackle this issue soon, as in my view the great ape enclosures are undoubtedly the single most important and justified criticism to be made about ARTIS. This also includes the neighboring chimpanzees, whose enclosure is similarly far from modern or showcase-worthy. To be fair, their aviary is not quite as terrible as it first might seem. Visitors can only see them from the front, but the enclosure is relatively deep, providing retreat areas, and as far as I could tell, it is fairly well equipped with plenty of climbing opportunities. Above visitors' heads, a passage leads into the building, which unfortunately can only offer the chimpanzees a very outdated indoor enclosure as well. My observations here at least suggest that they are trying to keep the animals stimulated and occupied. In 2023, there were already plans to transfer the group to another zoo, but this failed due to health reasons affecting one of the animals. Subsequently, a petition was launched to keep the animals here, which apparently succeeded. And now at least the building will be renovated and modernized, with the indoor area for the primates tripling in size, from 65.5 to around 170 square meters. Let's hope this is just the first step towards improving the conditions for both great ape species. From the chimpanzee enclosure, the path leads past the vicuñas onto the penguins. The African penguins have a very nice, spacious enclosure. I thought it was overnetted to keep herons away, but turns out there were actually flight-able birds in here as well. On my visit there were just the penguins here, but maybe that was just temporarily, I don't know. Anyway, as nice as this enclosure might seem, the pool appears to be quite shallow, and it would be great to allow the penguins deeper dives in the future, perhaps combined with an underwater viewing area. And that brings us nicely to the aquarium, which you can already see in the background of the penguin enclosure, but sadly I didn't see much more of it since it is currently closed for renovation. When it opened in 1882, it was, according to ARTIS itself at least, the largest and most modern aquarium in Europe. More than 140 years later though, a building like that definitely deserves a renovation. Or actually, it desperately needed it. While the historic core of the building is of course to be preserved, the opportunity is also being used to make it the most sustainable aquarium in the Netherlands. We can definitely look forward to the final results in 2026. If you want to get an impression beforehand, feel free to check out Just Goran, who takes you on a tour of the construction site on his channel. Our tour now continues towards the former bear enclosures. I didn't even have to look that up, because looking at this exhibit, now inhabited by mandrills, I immediately knew this is where polar bears used to live. Looking at pictures like this always puts things in perspective for me, because as wrong as it clearly appears to us today, there was a time when people genuinely believed that polar bears were given an adequate life in zoos like this. Or if we look back even further, even like this. So who knows how we will look back on today's standards of animal keeping in 20 or 30 years from now. That being said, even here and now, I'm not really a fan of how the mandrills are being kept either. Maybe it's just the visual aspect, the sight of rainforest animals on bare concrete that bothers me, and while there is some wood shavings on the ground, they only do so much to soften that impression. The second old bear enclosure was used to house a red panda, though by now it may have already moved to its new home in the front garden. Nearby, the sea lions are still swimming and diving in their pool. And once again, the setup only partially meets modern standards, although it seems that at least this second enclosure is in use too. Still, most visitors will probably enjoy the underwater views here, which are accessible via the adjoining butterfly pavilion. finally, once again, something I have nothing to complain about. The densely planted 1000 square meter tropical hall offers an excellent habitat for the free-flying butterflies, and depending on the season, visitors can observe 20 to 30 different species fluttering about. Every day you can witness new butterflies emerging from their chrysalises and being released into the hall, a truly special experience complemented by some very well-designed educational elements. Unfortunately, those are a bit tucked away and might go somewhat unnoticed. Right next to the tropical pavilion there is another tropical hall, but here there wasn't all that much to discover in terms of animals. A few chickens were wandering around, white-winged ducks could be seen near the water, and I also spotted some flying foxes. But there should be more to see here. For example, according to the map, there are unmistakably supposed to be crowned pigeons in this space. Anyway, outside again, I wasn't surprised not to see the cassowary, since its enclosure is wonderfully overgrown. That makes actually seeing one here all the more special. Just as special is the fact that alongside the butterfly pavilion, ARTIS also features an Insectarium. The most species-rich animal group in the world is often rather neglected in many zoos, but ARTIS offers a welcome exception. Housed in a former food warehouse from 1897, they've created a wonderful exhibition all about insects. Though it's telling that this already can be considered as one of the largest insectariums in the world, apparently. Sure, there's quite a bit to see here, not just insects and spiders, but also species like Polynesian tree snails, which ARTIS is actively involved in conserving. But given the sheer biodiversity of insects, this is still just a tiny fraction of what exists. And with that, we can now finally move on to the new garden, an expansion area where we first look at the new lion enclosure, which opened in 2023. And especially in terms of visitor experience, they created one of the best lion enclosures I have seen so far. While the view in the indoor area may seem rather unremarkable, the outdoor habitat already looks impressive even from behind the fence. Unfortunately, the glass viewing area where you can meet the lions at eye level as they rest on their hill is only accessible via staircase, so it's not wheelchair accessible. The real highlight though is the tunnel that runs through that very hill, placing visitors right in the middle of the habitat and offering a truly unique perspective. The lions unfortunately didn't help me demonstrate this in action during my visit, but with a bit of luck this can certainly lead to some spectacular encounters. On the other side, the path leads towards a playground and offers more views across a moat, again giving a wonderful look into the enclosure, which is visually designed to resemble the African savanna. So it's a fantastic space for both animals and visitors, not only a major improvement over the former setup, but also a habitat full of smart and exciting ideas in its own right. Behind the playground I just mentioned, there's also a view of the large savanna enclosure beyond. Although the path here was flooded from the water playground, I'm not sure if that is intended. The reticulated giraffes are probably the most prominent species here. What you're currently seeing is their old enclosure, so as you can see the space they had was very limited, but now behind this enclosure and the lovely giraffe house, the large expansion connects at the back. And even without knowing the exact numbers, you can see that they gained a lot of space, and I would estimate it has been quadrupled. The giraffes share this enclosure with greater kudus, zebras, and more skimmilar oryxes, though there were some temporary barriers in place when I visited. And then there's the Asian elephant enclosure, which is designed quite similarly, meaning you are currently looking at their old enclosure, which is all they used to have, and here as well the much larger expansion lies just behind, or rather diagonally beside it. And here as well the space has been quadrupled, while their new enclosure also offers far more in terms of structure and design. And the viewing opportunities for visitors are also much better here. Here you're currently seeing what I consider the most beautiful part of the complex. Visually it offers the best view of the enclosure, and if you actually catch the elephants bathing in the large pool, it is truly spectacular, I bet. Of course, the elephants can't come right up to the path because there's a barrier in the water, but you can still get very close to them, and you could probably also get wet yourself. What I find especially clever is that the path is actually set lower than the water, so the perspective is even more at eye level with the animals. Really brilliant. The contrast between old and new is really striking both for the savanna enclosure and the elephant area, and it's very interesting that it's so clearly visible here. However, I have to say I found this space behind the elephant house a bit odd. There is an interesting view of the savanna enclosure here and a glimpse into the stables, but it has a serious back-of-house vibe, almost like you're staying in a staff-only area. But well, that's nitpicking at a high level. Overall, the new garden, as the most modern part of the zoo, is a real eye-catcher, especially with the location right by the canal, which fits perfectly with Amsterdam as a city as well. So this is also a great spot to take a break, although we don't need any breaks anymore because we are done! And aside from a few exceptions here and there, I have shown you everything there is to see at ARTIS. Well, actually that's a lie, because there's also a planetarium that is included and 2 additional museums that cost extra. Micropia, the world's first museum dedicated to microorganisms, and the Grote Museum, I hope I pronounced that somewhat decently, a newly reopened museum about life, the human body and our connection to nature, both philosophical and biological in its approach. Since I didn't visit them, I cannot give you an assessment of those 2 museums, but as for the zoo, I'm honestly a bit torn. I think I might actually like the front garden the most. I clearly remember that after leaving the birdhouse, I briefly thought this could become my new favorite city zoo, but the middle garden is a bit more mid, and in the back garden there are still some clear and serious shortcomings, especially when it comes to the great apes. The zoo is aware of that, and both the new garden, especially with its brilliant lion habitat, and some of the modernized areas in the older parts of the zoo show that ARTIS is already well on the right track. There is a Masterplan 2030, though parts of it already seem outdated, so I just linked to something about it in the description, but overall I'm confident that after the aquarium renovation, ARTIS will continue steady working towards bringing the entire zoo up to a modern standard without losing its historical charm. So maybe ARTIS will end up becoming one of my favorite city zoos after all, but even now, despite the issues I've mentioned, I can recommend a visit, especially because of the clear progress being made. Whether ARTIS earns a spot on your to-do list during a trip or a day out in Amsterdam, with all the other sights the city has to offer, is of course up to you, but if you're looking for a historically fascinating zoo on its way into the future, this is definitely a solid choice, even if, like me, you might walk away with a slightly mixed impression. I'd really love to hear your thoughts about ARTIS in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I've visited 3 more zoos in the Netherlands on this trip alone, and you definitely don't want to miss those. Thank you so much for your attention. Dankjewel, have a nice day and see you soon, or as we say in Germany, nochmals echt sorry, dass wir lange Zeit solche Scheißnachbarn waren. Und wir sind vielleicht die Letzten, die was sagen sollten, aber warum wählt ihr Rechtspopulisten? Wir dachten, ihr seid cool.